Good evening, everyone, and welcome. My name is Deborah Williams, and I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at Strides Toronto. We are so glad that you've joined us today for one of our many sessions being held during Black Mental Health Week. We're here with Kelvin Nyusi-Mawazu, the creator of Black Sun Comics. For some background information on Black Mental Health Week before we get started, it is designed to support positive mental health of Black communities and individuals by providing alternative ways to support mental health and wellness. This year's event will work again to amplify the voices of Black communities and bring much needed awareness to the historical and current efforts of systemic anti-Black racism on mental health and wellness. The theme of Black Mental Health Week 2023 is Be You, Be Well. And our presenter today will be talking with us with that in mind. There'll be a short survey in the chat for you to complete and provide feedback before the end of the session. So please consider giving us your comments when we put that in the chat. The session is being recorded and will be available for viewing later on the blackmentalhealthweek.ca website. So before we get going, we're going to have a land and an ancestral acknowledgement, and let's take a moment of reflection as we respectfully acknowledge the sacred land in which we gather today as the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. For thousands of years, this has been the land of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, Seneca, Chippewa, Inuit, Métis, and the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit Peoples. We share responsibility with the caretakers of this land to ensure the dish is never empty and restore relationships that are based on peace, friendship, and trust. We take this moment to openly reflect on the history of these lands that we now call home and commit to aligning with the struggle of our Indigenous neighbors and supporting their future. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, or newcomers in this generation or generations past. We acknowledge the over 400-year history of communities of African descent in Canada who are not settlers, but who are forcibly displaced from their lands and brought to Turtle Island against their will as part of the transatlantic slave trade. We are indebted to our ancestors and recognize generations past. Today, we continue their work, fighting for our collective benefit, denouncing colonial histories, breaking down systemic barriers, improving the health and lives of our communities, and pushing back against anti-Black racism. We're committed to real and impactful change today and hope for future generations. So we're joined today by Kelvin Nyusi-Mawazu. He's the creator of Black Sun Comics. He expresses Afrofuturism in the backdrop for the very stories of his publications and believes that representation of Black characters is important for readers. Kelvin founded Black Sun Comics in 2016 as a way to write the characters he wishes he could have seen in some of his favorite graphic novels he read while growing up. The 5 books in the series so far are part of the growing Afrofuturism genre that melds science fiction and fantasy with African history and culture, blending the past and the future. Kelvin, I am going to turn this over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. That was an awesome introduction. I'm really excited to be here. Thanks to everyone who joined to listen in on the event, and thanks to everyone who organized it. I know, Deborah, you've probably done tons. There's probably a whole bunch of people behind you who have done tons as well. So
yes,
thanks to everyone. I'm looking forward to a very thought-provoking discussion that we're going to have today. So with that said, today what we're going to be talking about is the role of Afrofuturism, art, and well, its effect basically on Black mental wellness. As Deborah said, my name is Kelvin Nyusi-Mawazu. But before we get into that, I'm going to do a bit of housekeeping. So I do want the session to be interactive. What I mean by that is I'm going to ask questions during the conversation. Some of the answers might seem obvious, but I still would like you to answer anyway. I just don't want to be talking at you all the time. There's lots of people in the room, and we all come from different backgrounds and life experiences. So we don't have to agree on everything that's said, but I do want everyone to be respectful of everyone's opinions and experiences. So now we'll get into who am I. So my name is Kelvin Nyusi-Mawazu. I'm an author and an illustrator. I own a publishing company named Black Sun Comics, and we create Afrofuturist comics and graphic novels. And I'll just show you some pictures from some of them here. These are the 5 books that are out currently. The 6th one will be out in April and will debut at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. So I'm really excited about that. And we were blessed enough to be featured on CTV National News. I'm just going to play a short video clip. It's about 2 minutes here.
I think there's no sound.
Oh, no sound? No sound at all? Okay.
Yeah, we're not hearing it. You have to share your sound with us.
Share sound with you. Okay. Yikes. You know what? Don't worry about the video clip.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll leave a link to it. If you go to CTV News's website and just type in Afrofuturism, the video will show up.
Sure.
But we don't need to do that. So the session format, it's going to be broken down into 3 sections. First, I'm going to start off with some definitions and terminology, just so that we can all be on the exact same page and know what we're all talking about. Next, I'm going to get into Afrofuturism, identity, Black images in media and its relation to Black mental health specifically. And then I'm going to look at, we're going to look at strategies for mental wellness, right? So that's the basic format of the session. And I'll start off with some terms. So during the discussion, you're going to hear me say things like people of African descent or Black person or Black folks. Those 2 terms are interchangeable. So if I say person of African descent, I mean Black person. If I say Black person, I mean person of African descent. And Black person is, someone who phenotypically looks like me, right? That's what I mean by a Black person. Sometimes I'll say biracial or mixed, and this refers to someone who has 1 Black parent, right? So a Black person or person of African descent has 2 Black parents. A person who's biracial or mixed has 1 Black parent. And the reason why I make the distinction is because the life experience of the 2, it's not exactly the same. And this will come into play later on during the discussion. Okay, so what is Afrofuturism? Okay, it's sometimes referred to as Black speculative fiction. And if you go to Wikipedia, there's a very long and thorough definition of Afrofuturism there. But I find that it's very, very academic. So if you're not in the world of academia, a lot of the definition just flies right over your head and you don't exactly know what it means. Just to brace everyone, I'm going to get a bit out there. So I'm a big nerd. I'm a big science fiction fan. So I'm going to be talking about some things that you might find weird. So just stay with me. It'll all make sense as I go over it. Let's go to the next slide. Just a brief history. So the concept of Afrofuturism has existed for thousands of years. Granted, it wasn't always called Afrofuturism, but the concept was there. If you go back to the Dogon people of West Africa, I believe what's now called Mali, they had stories of being visited by extraterrestrial beings, amphibian-like beings who came and visited them and bestowed knowledge of the planet to them, right? The picture here pictures Sun Ra. I don't know if anyone who's familiar with him, but Sun Ra was a jazz musician. From the 1940s to the 70s, he was prominent. And he also came out with a film called Space is the Place. And he's considered the godfather of what we call modern Afrofuturism. But even when he was doing it, it wasn't quite Afrofuturism yet. The term didn't appear until the early 90s by Mark Derry, who surprisingly isn't Black. He's a white dude who's an academic writer and teacher who coined the term Afrofuturism. And that kind of took off and became what people referred to it as. The reason why I mentioned the Dogon people and Sun Ra is because mental health has a lot to do with your identity and sense of self. And it also speaks to the fact that these fantastic stories have always been told by Black people for centuries, right? It's nothing new, what's happening. So those are some cool things to keep in mind. Now, to get a better understanding of Afrofuturism, we have to kind of take a step back and look at science fiction. Actually, can people, in a Zoom meeting, people can raise their hands, right? There's a raise your hand emoji? Okay. So just out of curiosity, how many science fiction fans are in the room? Just, raise your hand. I just kind of want to get an idea of who I'm speaking with. Okay. Does anyone think they can define science fiction? Who wants to take a shot?
I guess I'll try. I guess for me, science fiction is just, I guess fiction that relies on like, I guess our knowledge of the universe, but it's, not 100% accurate. It's still fiction. If I'm making any sense.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thanks for participating and answering that. You're right. Science fiction is a genre of speculative fiction which typically deals with imaginative and futuristic concepts such as advanced science and technology, space exploration, time travel, parallel universes, and extraterrestrial life. So I told you I was going to go out there, right? So that's science fiction. Now, another genre is fantasy. Can anyone think they can define fantasy? If anyone's brave enough to say.
I think fantasy doesn't necessarily speak to the future, but somebody said something similar to what I was going to say. It is still about, it's less speculative, more about, this is hard, more about imagining magical worlds and world building. Yeah, that's as far as I can get.
No, that's great. That's fantastic. You're right. Fantasy is another genre of speculative fiction involving magical elements this time, typically set in a fictional universe and sometimes inspired by mythology and folklore. So for the layperson, Star Trek would be considered science fiction, right? Something like Harry Potter would be considered fantasy. So that's kind of what Afrofuturism, that's kind of what Afrofuturism comes out of. Afrofuturism is similar to science fiction and fantasy, but mixes elements of Black history and politics in with the narrative. So that's the main difference in what separates it from science fiction and fantasy. There's a prominent Afrofuturist curator named, oh my gosh, what's her name? Ingrid Lafleur, who coined the term, who coined this phrase here. Afrofuturism is a way of imagining possible futures through a Black cultural lens, right? So we get all the fantastic things like aliens and space and time travel, but it's from a Black perspective. So kind of like science fiction and fantasy from a Black perspective. So that's in a nutshell what Afrofuturism is. So why do I do this? In the video that I attempted to show, it kind of spoke to that. And if you get a chance later, you can check it out on the CTV News website. But why do I bother doing this? I get asked this a lot, and I always find it a bit difficult to answer this question. And actually, when Deborah asked me to do this presentation, I thought about it long and hard. I've always been a fan of science fiction and fantasy, but I've always been frustrated with the way that Black people are depicted in science fiction and fantasy. Things just never sat right. And as a kid, when I was 5 years old, watching things like Doctor Who and whatever else, I wasn't able to verbalize it, but it just didn't sit right with me. And after thinking about it long and hard, the reason why I do what I do is basically for peace of mind and mental wellness, right? Generally speaking, we know about things like physical well-being and having to consume nutritious food in order to stay healthy. The same applies to our mental health. And the type of content that you consume can have a big impact on your mental well-being, right? That is because your mental well-being is very much tied to your sense of self, your identity, right? So if you don't have a strong sense of self and who you are and why you're here, it's easier to fall by the wayside. I think there was a saying, someone who doesn't stand for anything will fall. Someone who doesn't stand for something will fall for anything, right? So you really have to have a strong sense of identity. So I mentioned before that I was frustrated with the depictions of Black folks that I was seeing in the content that I was consuming. But what exactly was problematic, right? what didn't jive properly in my head. So I want to take some time to discuss that. What was happening? Oh, actually, I should mention beforehand that although I'm speaking specifically about science fiction and fantasy, these depictions don't just they're not relegated to just those two genres, right? So no matter what you're watching or consuming, what I'm going to talk about, the stereotypes that I'm going to talk about apply to those as well. I just focus a lot on science fiction and fantasy because that's just what I like. So stereotypes, we all know what stereotypes are. Who in the room can define stereotypes? Who wants to take a crack at that? We had some brave people like Amanda and Ashana participate, but I won't pick on them this time. Is there anyone else who thinks that they can take a shot at this?
False statements made by, I guess, perceived bias of a, it doesn't necessarily have to be or just like of a group of people, a certain group of people tied together by, I think it's just a group of people. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It's very difficult to answer these questions on the spot. I get it. So I thank you for participating. You touched on a lot of great points. So stereotype is a generalized belief about a particular category of people. It is an expectation that people might have about every person of a particular group. So that's the dictionary definition, right? But socially, it's a bit different. So I'm going to ask another question. What are some popular Black stereotypes? Who wants to volunteer? I think there's Regine. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
I think one of them is
It's sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, let's hear from Regine.
Rajon.
Rajon, sorry. Let's
Yeah.
hear from Rajon.
Okay. Yeah. So, like a common Black stereotype for me, from my experiences, is like I'm from the Caribbean, from Trinidad. So it's just like all Caribbean people are from Jamaica.
Okay. That's a good one. My family is from Anguilla in the Caribbean, a small island that has the best beaches in the Caribbean. You can't argue with me about that. But anyways, when I was in high school, everyone thought I was Jamaican. So I understand exactly where you're coming from. Thanks for volunteering that. Let's try Ashana.
I know one that for some reason I always find interesting is that all Black people are athletic.
That's another popular one. I know in high school for myself, it's Kelvin, how come you don't play basketball? You should play basketball. You don't play basketball? Play basketball. Let's hear from, okay, I don't want to, Oluwabamuni. I think I butchered that. I apologize.
Christiana. You could say, call me Christiana. I usually change my name prior to sessions, but definitely got the athletic one. I was gonna say even this like stereotype of Black people not into science fiction, or like that's not a Black thing, or fantasy, certain music genres like Black people or country's not like a Black thing and stuff like that. Like country music, heard a lot, like just so many different things.
Yep, that's another good one. I listen to a lot of techno, and people think that techno isn't Black music, but it was actually created in Detroit by 3 Black dudes. So that's interesting. There's a documentary called High Tech Soul that I think you can see on YouTube that documents the history of techno. But thank you for that, Christiana. Anyone else? Any other Black stereotypes? Okay, we're a bit shy. That's all right. So I'm going to break down some more of them, but I want to ask another question. So those of you in the room who are of African descent have probably experienced, being stereotyped. How are those stereotypes propagated through society? How do you think that they came to fall on you? Where do you think they come from? And again, I'll just ask the question to the room. Okay, we have Amanda.
Yes, so in a few ways, I would say media, history, and media would include books, but visual media especially, publicities, sports, politics. So basically everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I think there was Zai. Oh my gosh, it disappeared. Zai. Zahana?
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, Zahaya.
Zahaya. Zahaya.
Yeah,
Sorry for mispronouncing your name.
that's okay. Um, I'd say also just isolated social settings would be another place where stereotypes are propagated. Um,
Interesting.
and
Okay.
yeah, what I mean by that is just like if you are in an environment where there's a lack of diversity,
Mhm.
and then just the assumptions that people will pull from just based on the limited information they receive. So, and I'm not exactly sure if I'm explaining it properly, but
That's
Yeah.
well said. I agree with that. That's well said.
yeah. Also, just side note, I just want to say I'm also from Anguilla, so hey.
Seriously?
Yeah.
What's your
started
last name?
My father was who there, Richardson.
Okay, yeah, that's an
So,
Anguillian last name.
yep.
Okay. Okay.
But
Represent.
I'm also Bahamian, so that's where the role is from.
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thanks for joining Zahia.
Yeah.
And Rayjan has her hand up.
Yeah, so I just want to say that media representation as well, like going back to what someone said about media representation and TV representation, where they, like, if you look at these movies or whatever, they're always showing the Black character as doing the menial jobs because it's the stereotype. Like you would see like the Black woman, for example, being the housemaids, or you would see like the Black guy being the stereotype of the gangster lifestyle or whatever. So the stereotypes that's represented in media representation.
Rayjan's going to do my presentation for me. You touched on a lot of great things. Absolutely. I'll take two more. So Brian, and then we'll go to Lammy. So Brian, if you can open your mic.
Please open. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sometimes these stereotypes are propagated by ourselves. I actually was on social media the other day, and I'm not sure if you're aware of the social media app Vine, but
Yeah.
yeah, a few years ago there was a Black comedian who would, like, pretty much fulfill all the stereotypes. There was a video of him running across the street acting like a banana, acting like a monkey because he saw watermelon, and pretty much he ran there and pretty much he was just trying to use his comedy as a way to gain followers. So that's a way.
That's a good one. Self-hate is an issue that we're going to speak of a bit later on. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And then we'll go to Lammy, and then I'll move on to the rest of the presentation.
Hi. Hi, sorry about that. Thank you for
No
this
worries.
space. I think so. It's already been mentioned, media, but I want to zero in, especially on like historical media, and the fact that, especially in terms of the United States, there's a lot of documentation of how there was a lot of effort and industry into propagating certain stereotypes of Black people, like media in so many different ways. Obviously, like TV and movies, or like film media is one, but even in terms of like making certain products that would feature certain stereotypes of Black people. So it was an industry. It was a concerted effort to represent Black people in a very specific way.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm glad that we have a very sharp and astute group. So this is great. The main way that stereotypes are propagated is through mass media, and a lot of you said this, have said this already. The main source, mass media, it means the main. Excuse me, slurring my words. The main means of mass communication, such as broadcasting, publishing, the internet, considered collectively. So you consider all those things collectively. That's what is defined as mass media. So all these stereotypes we'll find through, pretty much whatever we're consuming, but have no control over, right? We don't control the creation of it, but we consume it. The type of media that I'm going to be focusing on here is the medium of TV and film. And there's a few reasons for that. Because I think most people watch TV and most people watch movies. So, when I speak of a particular film or a particular TV show, most people can kind of relate and understand that. I don't want to take obscure comic book references because not everyone will know that. Film and TV is very interesting because it's a one-way form of communication. So you sit there and you're very passive and it just talks to you, right? And you just absorb whatever's being told. You don't get to give any feedback, not really. The other reason why film and TV is very interesting is because people tend to believe what they see, right? We have eyes, and if we see it, we will believe it. It's interesting. I remember speaking with someone who saw, I don't know, some movie, where there were some aliens. I wish I remember the name of it, but I remember the feedback that they told me is that, the aliens didn't look real. And it's like, well, nothing in it is real. So what do you mean? But when it does look real, we tend to believe it, even if it's completely fake, like the movie Aliens, right? They make it look very realistic. They get good actors to participate in these movies, and you kind of get sucked into the narrative. And at that point, you're just being programmed as well as entertained, right? So we're going to talk about that. We talked about popular Black stereotypes, but now I'm going to kind of go through them. And these, the ones that I'm going to mention are not the only ones, but I feel that they're the most popular ones. Also, I'm going to be using some celebrities as examples. I'm not showing them because I'm criticizing the celebrity, right? They work in a system just like all of us. Actually, what I've chosen is some of my favorite actors, Hollywood actors and actresses. So we're going to break down things. The stereotypes are mainly divided. There's some that are specific to Black females and some that are specific to Black males. So I'm going to kind of break it out that way. I'm going to talk about the description, the origins, the social significance, and some examples. So what we have here is the mammy character, and I believe that was mentioned before. So the mammy character is usually dark-skinned, depicted as a dark-skinned, overweight caregiver, right? She's the aggressive domestic manager, right? So she's there to take care of the house. She's there to take care of the white people who she's working for, right? She has no life outside of those tasks, right? The origins of this, enslaved African females were tasked with the duties, well, actually not all, but some enslaved African females were tasked with the duties of domestic workers. So their job would be to take care of the house. The social significance, this is promoted to show that enslaved Africans were happy in their servitude, right? So the mammy character is usually very happy to do what she's doing. But she's very aggressive towards the other Black people who are in the house, especially the Black males, right? Always very scolding of them. Some examples are Aunt Jemima. So I know there was, I think it was Lammy who had mentioned, there was a considered economic effort to promote these stereotypes, and Aunt Jemima is one of them. There's movies like The Help, Oprah Winfrey as well, right? Again, not a criticism of her, but I believe that's a stereotype that she's used to become as popular as she is. Were there any questions or comments about this stereotype? Can anyone think of any other examples in popular media where they might have seen this?
I'd like to say that I'm very it's eye-opening for you to put Oprah in that character in that category for me.
Yeah,
I see it now.
yeah, it's true. And it's not until you really take a step back and see it, but yeah, she kind of fits those descriptions, right? Again, not a criticism of her. She's used it to her advantage and made millions of dollars on it. Good for her. But that's a stereotype that she's kind of used. Any other questions or comments about the mammy character? No,
Well, a
okay.
classic example was in Gone with the Wind, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Gone with the Wind is an excellent example of that. Hattie McDaniel was that the actress's name? I think.
I mean, very charismatically done, and I think it's done with charm. But I guess if I was of African origins, I might not view it through that lens. And obviously, I think now, even though I like the movie, enjoy it as a classic, sometimes you do see things of a certain era and certain representational language in, for example, Wonder Woman's Golden Age arc of certain stereotypes racially, and you wince a bit. And it's just sometimes things change, you become more enlightened through the passing of time that certain things are no longer acceptable. Even things I was on the receiving end myself, not obviously an African with darker skin, but as somebody who has olive skin, I took a bit of hammer for not being blonde, pale, and blue-eyed.
Mhm.
So while I don't have absolute understanding of it, I have been on the receiving end of, shall I say,
Oh, I think you cut out, Kyle. You still there?
Before you go to Lammy's hand in the chat, there are people that are saying that's present
I
in
can understand
cartoons as well.
if people feel somebody who's quite a fan of Kelvin's work. What I like about his attitude, and while
Oh, sorry, Kyle. I don't know if you can hear me, but we can't hear you right now. So maybe hold the thought. I think, Deborah, you mentioned there's some people in the chat, and then we can come back to Kyle in a bit.
Yeah, just saying
Is
before
that
you
cool?
go to Lammy's hand, there are people in the chat that are talking about this being present in the cartoons as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, okay, I see the chat here. Tom and Jerry,
Yeah.
yes, Tom and
And
Jerry is a
Betty
great
Boop.
example. I haven't seen too much Betty Boop, so I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if you know, those stereotypes were there. So thank you for participating. Thank you for giving us those examples. That's good. Let's move on to the next one.
Lammy's hand has been up. Do you want to?
Oh, Lammy, sorry.
Yeah,
Thanks for reminding. Lammy, you
It's
had
all
something
right.
to say.
Hi. So my it's more of a question.
Mhm.
And I guess we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But I think the Oprah example does bring up to me a question of like, when is somebody exploiting a stereotype versus just potentially being themselves? Because I ask this question because sometimes I think us as Black people, we have this, we feel this pressure to not act stereotypical, even if something is authentic to us. Does this make sense?
Yeah,
So can you maybe
makes
speak a little bit to how you believe Oprah is exploiting the mammy stereotype, and maybe just largely how we as Black people sort of navigate that? And unfortunately, this is the unfortunate thing about racialization, right? It's the unfortunate thing about anti-Black racism. It's that we can't just be sometimes. We always have to be thinking about, oh, am I being a stereotype right now? Oh, I don't want to be a stereotype, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's good. It's difficult for me to answer. I can tell you what I do in my life. I'm just myself. And I know that people are going to have particular views about me, and that's fine. As long as they don't make it my problem, then that's okay. And in situations where, you know, because there's some things that I do that might be considered stereotypical. I like underground 90s hip hop, right? There's some things that I do that are not stereotypically Black, like, you know, being a fan of science fiction and fantasy. So you just kind of have to be yourself in all situations. And that's how you navigate life. And you just ensure that people have to deal with you as you are, right? You know, it can be very tiring to try and meet someone else's expectations, right? So you really just have to be yourself. And this goes back to mental health, because we're bombarded with these images all the time, right? And sometimes you might want to fall into these stereotypes because it might be easier, because this is what people expect from you. but you can't do that. You just have to be yourself. As for whether Oprah is exploiting that stereotype, I don't know if exploitation is the word. I think it's worked in her favor. She's able to use that. You know, good for her. I can't hate on what she's done. So that part I can't really answer for you. So I hope that kind of addresses what you were saying. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So this is the angry, okay, I actually should have updated this slide. The angry Black woman, angry/strong Black woman. How many sisters in the room have been referred to as the angry or strong Black woman? Raise your hand. Okay, so we have lots of hands. So the angry Black woman, the angry/strong Black woman, is depicted as being loud, obnoxious. She has no maternal instincts whatsoever. This is where we get the stereotype of the single welfare mother or welfare queen. And what I have here is Cookie from Empire. The origins of this is enslaved African females were made to work in the fields with the men. So they took on a lot of masculine traits. Harriet Tubman is a good example of this. She was out in the field. And actually those strengths is what she was used to able to free enslaved Africans by escaping to Canada. The social significance of this, so this stereotype is used to undermine or delegitimize real emotional trauma. So during chattel slavery, for the enslaved Africans who went through that, there are times when, you know, either your husband might have been sold away or your children would have been sold away. And the rationale was, why are you so angry? It's just a slave, right? It's not a big deal. You know, so she's just, it's dismissive. She's just angry. That's how Black women are. They're just always angry. Yeah, so that's the angry/strong Black woman stereotype. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this one?
I was gonna say, I've often been referred to as an angry Black woman, which I find hilarious because I've never been in a physical altercation in my life. But one of the things though that this kind of made me think of is I think it was Lonnie. I think who was talking about, you know, the not trying to play into stereotypes or things like that. But I found, and this is one of the reasons why I left corporate, is that I often felt like I had to make myself smaller so that, because no matter what I did, I would still be perceived in this way, even, you know, even though I don't consider myself to fall into these stereotypes. But yeah, it's just that the minute you say, yeah, somebody just said it in the chat, like the minute you say your opinion about something and because you can speak it confidently, all of a sudden it's threatening or things of that sort. So I honestly wonder how in a corporate setting or any type of, you know, area where you're surrounded by people who are just not culturally like you and have not been exposed to people who are culturally like you, how you can honestly exist as yourself, because there's just too much opposing information that and misinformation that people receive about what your actions are supposed to be expressing.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
It's like,
because if you speak confidently, it's like, well, no, she's not angry. She's just very confident and understands what she's talking about, right? But then that's perceived as, well, she's angry. You know, stop attacking me. that type of thing. So it's difficult, and you know, I can't answer that question. In corporate settings, I get the same thing too sometimes, right?
In the
That's a
chat,
tough
we
one.
have people saying any Black woman with an opinion. The real question is, name a movie where we are not, and intelligent Black women are forced into this category.
Yep, all great observations. So here's the interesting thing, like I'm going through these stereotypes, and the really interesting thing is that none of these people that I'm depicting are real, right? Cookie from Empire doesn't exist, right? Viola Desmond's character from The Help doesn't exist. It's all fiction, but it has real effects on our lives, right? So this is the really interesting thing about these stereotypes. And, you know, I can verbalize it now, but as a kid, I was seeing stuff like this and saying, you know, something's not right. Now I'm going to get into the male stereotypes. There's the black friend or the token. And the token is described as someone who is inconsequential to the story. They're a charity case. It's the black dude who gets killed, right? And this is T-Dog from The Walking Dead. I don't know if anyone has seen the Walking Dead. I used to be a big fan of it. It kind of got dull during the end, but anyways, the reason for the black friend is to try and show that whatever is being presented to you is not really racist, because, you know, look, we have a black guy here. So this started to appear after the civil rights movement in the United States during the 1960s. And yeah, as I said, the social significance is used to try and prove that racism does not exist. Some examples of this are South Park, or I don't know if anyone remembers Malcolm in the Middle. He had the friend who was in a wheelchair who could barely speak. The black friend is usually sometimes handicapped in some sort of way as well. So that's an interesting characteristic of the black friend.
In the chat, there also is a comment about the secondary character or person who builds up the primary character.
Yeah, so the black friend is always contrasted against the lead character, who is usually white, right? So the black friend is there to support whatever the lead character is doing. The black friend has no life outside of helping the lead character. So that's the black friend character. How are we doing for time? 7:44. Okay, so we have a bit of time left.
Okay.
The thug, the gangster, the degenerate. So this is Omar from The Wire, which is a show that I like. I love this show. At the same time, though, I realize that the whole thing is one huge stereotype, right? So it's very interesting. We really have to be conscious of what it is that we're consuming. The thug is typically male. Sometimes it's portrayed as a female too, but it's typically male. It's the bad guy, the street criminal, the drug addict, the lowlife, the deadbeat dad, the savage, you know, all those things. And the origins, this started during someone mentioned Boys in the Hood and Juice. Yep. Although Boys in the Hood, I will say with Boys in the Hood, they kind of explain things a bit more. Anyways, let me go on. So the social significance of this, it's used to justify the mass incarceration of black males, right? They're thugs, they're criminals, they're out of control. We have to lock them all up. That's the mentality behind it. Good examples of this are the Wire, Demolition Man, Training Day, right? It's funny that Denzel Washington won an Oscar for that movie, but not for Malcolm X. Yeah, any questions about this stereotype, the thug character, or any other observations?
I don't see any other hands, but I do have my hand up. I want to ask you if you think that if there's any difference or significance to if the production team or if the writer or director is Black. And, you know, like I'm watching Snowfall right now. And that
I haven't seen that one.
And sorry?
What's Snowfall about? I don't know this.
Snowfall is about the rise of the drug trade, but the point of view is that it was all perpetuated by the CIA funding the Sandinistas through, you know, destroying the Black community. And I'm wondering if you think that there's any difference in the social significance of Black people telling a story that has some of the descriptions of these characteristics from a point of view of what they grew up in, or if there's room for that.
Yeah, it can make a difference, right? It can be a more authentic story if it's coming from, you know, a Black person with that lived experience. We have to remember though that a lot of actually 99.9% of the media that we consume is not funded by Black money, right? It's funded by other people's money. So they have the final say in what's being seen. So that's why I say Boys in the Hood is a thug movie. But John Singleton, the director of that, had put some really educational facts in there to try and explain the circumstances. It's not just, oh, look at these Black guys running around shooting up each other, right? It's not just that, and you're just left to assume that's just what Black people do, right? So to answer your question, yes, it can make a difference.
Okay.
And again, this is why we have to think critically about the media that we consume, right? We have to understand that as Black folks, we don't have any control over its creation, right? Even if it's someone who's directing and writing it, right? That still has to be greenlit by someone else, right? So those are the kind of things to keep in mind.
Brian has a quick question.
Yes, Brian.
It is a quick question. I want to ask your opinion on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, just because I feel like that show highlights a lot of stereotypes with, Will coming from the hood, the ghetto, living with a more prominent family. Like, what is your opinion about that idea?
Yeah, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was a show that I watched and I enjoyed. I liked it. See, this is where it gets kind of tricky because that's actually his lived experience, right? That's what he went through. So he's telling the story about himself. Now, what can popularize it is because it's fitting this thug stereotype, people can get into it. And what I mean by people, I mean like the larger dominant society. Same thing with Oprah, right? And the mammy stereotype. So it was cool. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, even though he was from the hood, he kind of presented this buffoonish, he's very funny and buffoonish kind of character in that, and like very likable, but it was comedic, which goes into another stereotype that I'm going to speak of a bit later on. So if you're asking if I like the show, yeah, I thought it was cool. I enjoyed it. I liked watching it. Are there stereotypes that are propagated in it? Absolutely. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you.
Okay, cool. I think the issue becomes that, sorry, just reading the chat here. Amanda says, I think the issue becomes if that is the only character in media, nothing wrong with reality, but it's pigeonholing. Yes, that's a great point. So to Deborah's point, does it make a difference if Black people are involved? Well, if the only stories that Black people are allowed to tell are thug stories, then it becomes problematic, right? So for every thug story, there should be a story about, traveling to Mars, right? So if there was that balance, then it wouldn't be so much of an issue. But the problem is we're only seeing this over and over and over and over again, right? So that's something we have to keep in mind as well. The Mandingo. So the description, this is brutish, bestial, animalistic, hypersexual, stud. His only use is breeding. And there's a female equivalent to this that I didn't go over, but we'll deal with this one now. The origins that started to appear again during chattel slavery in the Caribbean and in the United States of America and Canada as well. And this was used to justify the lynchings of Black people, right? There was this notion that Black men were, out trying to assault white women, right? So in order to stop this, we have to get rid of them. And examples of this are, people in professional sports, rap videos, right? We see this stereotype very often. Any observations about this that anyone wants to speak of? Oh, I think Brian and Lammy have their hands raised.
Brian, is that a same hand or is that an old hand?
It's an old hand, sorry.
Okay, so Lammy was next and then Christiana.
Hi, again, thank you for this space. Really, really love these conversations. This may be a philosophical question, but is it possible to create work that involves Black people that doesn't have stereotypes? Because again,
yes,
the sad thing about these stereotypes is, as I mentioned, they were created with concerted effort early on and have lingered, right? It's like sort of they planted those seeds and set that foundation. So basically any person now exemplifying anger will be traced back to that angry Black, man, woman stereotype. But Black people can be angry, just like any other human can be. So, like, is it possible? Is it truly possible to create work that has no stereotypes, like good work, like powerful work, moving work that doesn't have stereotypes, Black stereotypes?
Yeah, you can read my books.
I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it, love it.
That's a shameless plug, but the reason why I'm going through this is because these are the things that I've noticed in the media that I was consuming, and I wanted specifically to make something that didn't harken back to these things. So you're right. Can Black people get angry? Of course. And anger is a good thing if you can use it to get stuff done, right?
Someone's referencing The Harder They Fall in the chat, and that's a great example.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
It's on Netflix. You should try that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Amanda says I have to. Okay, so I'll do it.
and another person is making the point that the dangerous impact is Emmett Till, Trayvon Martin, etc.
Yes. That's another excellent point. Emmett Till especially, right? And actually they found that the lady who accused him lied, right? It didn't actually happen, and he was killed. So these things have real effects on our lives. And I think someone else has their hand raised. Christiana,
yes.
Christiana.
I was gonna ask a question about your mention for examples for the professional sports, but I think as you're speaking, are you more so speaking about when they like falsely accuse like sports players of that same notion?
What, like when sports players are accused of, are you speaking of something specific?
Because you said that the Mandingo stereotype is like based on Black men being falsely accused of raping or assaulting white women. Is that why did you use the example of professional sports?
Oh, okay, I understand your question. So professional sports, again, part of the reason why it's popular is because these are, let's say, tamed Negroes. We'll say that, right? So they're Mandingos, but they've been controlled, right? So they play these sports, and it's like, look at my pet Negro, and watch him dribble a ball and do all these things. So it's still the stereotype, but in professional sports, it's sanctioned because it's controlled. Does that kind of answer what you were saying?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the question, by the way. Next is the Sambo. So this is JJ from Good Times, and this is gonna date me. I used to watch this show many moons ago. So the description, the Sambo is carefree, is not smart, they're lazy, always happy, always dancing. And again, this started to appear in media during chattel slavery, and it was used to minimize the severity of Black mistreatment. Slavery is not so bad. Look at how happy they are. They're dancing, they're smiling, they're chomping on fried chicken and watermelon, right? So these are some of the what you call it, some of the justifications that are used. JJ in Good Times. I forget who it was who brought up Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but Fresh Prince of Bel-Air kind of falls into this character as well, right? The comedic funny guy. He's from the hood and gone through these horrible circumstances, but it's okay. He's laughing, so it's not really that bad, right? So those are things that you need to keep in mind. Any questions about the Sambo character? Or
I feel like the Sambo character is basically in opposition to the one before, the thug and the Mendigo. Like the Sambo is kind of like the good Negro, the Negro that is like there to entertain.
Yep. Great point.
Brian has his hand up on this one as well.
Okay, so
I was just going to ask, do you think that the Sambo is kind of like almost a coping mechanism for some people? Like,
oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
What you'll find in a lot of classrooms, Black boys will fall into the Sambo character because they get an easier time if they're more entertaining. right? The teachers tend to pick on them less if they're the class clown, right? So we're bombarded with these stereotypes, and sometimes sometimes it could feel easier to fit into that just to go along to get along type thing. Someone mentioned also in corporate, yeah, that's true too. Right? There's times when I've been asked, hey, Kelvin, tell us a joke. I'm like, what? No, I don't have any jokes. But yeah, that's the Sambo. Next, we'll get into, oh, sorry, any other questions about the Sambo, or we're good? Okay, I want to be mindful of time, so we'll go through the rest. This is the last one for now. So we have the magic Negro, and this is a term that was coined by Spike Lee. And this is Denzel Washington from the movie Book of Eli, which is actually one of my favorite movies, but it is a magic Negro story. So the magic Negro is almost always a male from a low social status. So, they're like a homeless, a wanderer, that type of thing. And they literally have magic powers, literally, within the world of whatever intellectual property we're looking at. And the magic Negro always sacrifices himself for the greater white society, always, right? The origins, I couldn't really place where the origins of this comes from, but the social significance is that it provides a non-threatening view of Black males and is used to justify their mistreatment, right? So, he'll take one for the team type of thing. That's the kind of mentality. In the movie, I don't know, has anyone seen the Book of Eli?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I don't want to spoil it, but I won't spoil it. But if you haven't seen it, I'd recommend going to see it. Some other examples of the Magic Negro are The Green Mile, Bruce Almighty, I Am Legend, again, Book of Eli. Can anyone think of any examples that they might have come across?
Could you say like any, a lot of movies where Will Smith is in it?
Let me see. I've seen, there was the one, well,
Like
The one where he's the caddy.
Caddy, which one was that? Oh,
He
I haven't
was-
seen that one. I
he
know which one you're
was
talking about, but I haven't seen it.
Bagger Vance, The Legend of Bagger Vance.
Okay, I haven't seen that. But
iRobot?
What about,
does he sacrifice himself in iRobot? I forget. I remember seeing that, but I forget how it ended.
No, he just sort of like turns into this expert on a game that Blacks have no access to.
Okay.
Being this guy's caddy, like sort of like just pops up from out of nowhere. I was gonna say also Whoopi Goldberg from Ghost.
Yes, so that's why I said usually male, but sometimes female. Whoopi Goldberg plays a lot of female Magic Negro characters. In Star Trek, her character as Guinan is also a Magic Negro. She's removed from all other Black folks, and she's just there. And she's kind of a / Magic Negro / mammy character in Star Trek. It's very interesting how the stereotypes are kind of mixed and matched. So yeah, that's the Magic Negro stereotype. There's more, but again, these are the most popular ones.
I was gonna ask a question real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Would the Blind Side be considered a movie that highlights the Magic Negro, or I mean the Magic? Yeah.
I have not seen The Blind Side. I've heard of it. Is that the one? Is that it? I feel like it's a sports movie.
The football player needs this white housewife to teach him how to fight.
Okay, so that's more of like a white savior film, right? So
For sure.
the savage Negro is tamed by the benevolent white woman.
Very much so.
King Kong is actually an example of that, but instead of a Black dude, they used a gorilla. Planet of the Apes is kind of like that too. Actually, there's an interview with Rod Serling, who actually wrote Planet of the Apes. Rod Serling did The Twilight Zone, but he wrote Planet of the Apes, and he said he wanted to talk about race in the 60s, but wanted to do it in a way that people might not, it wouldn't be so obvious. So basically, he made the black folks apes in that, right? And reversed everything, you know, Planet of the Apes, people's worst fear. So it's interesting. But again, we need to be cognizant of what it is that we're watching so that we're not just programmed and just accept it as, you know, this is what it is, right? You still have to be yourself. You still have to maintain your own mental health and have an understanding of who you are. So
There's
what happens?
a comment in the chat about
Oh,
Obama expecting to
Yeah.
be a magical Negro from all sides as well, which is an
Yes.
interesting comment.
Actually, that is true. The same way Oprah has used the mammy stereotype, Obama has used the magic Negro stereotype to popularize himself too. He can do anything, right? He's magic. And he's not really around a lot of other common Black folks. He's around a lot of Black celebrities, and that's cool, but not your average Black person, right? So that's interesting. I'm glad you made that observation. So I'm going to ask this question, but we all kind of know the answer. What happens when Black stereotypes are propagated through mass media, right? It becomes part of the anti-Black racism that we face all the time, right? If you're someone of African descent. Now I'm going to ask another question. What happens when these Black stereotypes are propagated? Whoops, let me go here. What do you think happens when you know, these stereotypes are propagated to Black children? What do you think the effect is? Amanda?
Christiana in the chat says it
Oh, yeah.
internalizes racism and self-hate.
Absolutely. And actually, I'll ask, what do you think is the physical outcome of self-hate?
The physical outcome?
Yeah, like, okay, so there's self-hate. So if I'm a Black person who is not comfortable with my Blackness, what do I go out into the world and do?
Well, historically, they had historically, and sometimes it happens still, although I see a bit of a difference, but there are people who lighten their skin, people who straighten their hair, who go into surgery to make their nose smaller. I'm thinking, like, when we look at pictures of young Michael Jackson, he was beautiful,
yeah,
but by the end, he was a completely different person. So physically, literally changing your skin and your bone structure to not look as Black.
Yeah.
And in terms of like what happens when it's propagated through mass media, there's a lot of self-hate that happens, and there's an expectation to act a certain way. So people asking you to play basketball and being angry that you don't want to, you're not doing the thing that you're expected to do to fit into the stereotypes, and that happens a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Amanda had her hand up.
Oh, that was me.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Thank you, Amanda.
Oh, good. No
Lammy is next, I think.
Yes, thank you. The effect of stereotypes on the mental health of Black children. I think what's standing out for me right now is the limiting of human potential, the limiting of self-actualization. I remember growing up, and there was this idea of acting Black and acting white. And obviously, I don't need to get into the expectations of each of them. I'm pretty sure we all know what the expectation of acting Black and the expectation of acting white was. And these things, it just limits us. It limits us. I mean, yeah, hopefully a lot of people grow out of it in adulthood, but even that, I feel like a seed has already been planted so young that it's hard to tell the ripple effects of something like that. So yeah, all of these images that we see, it gets deep. It gets deep. Yes.
Absolutely. No, those are excellent observations. Yeah, the stereotypes that we see limit the Black imagination, right? If you can't see yourself in the future, then what's the point? Who cares? I'll just do whatever. Ashana, did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah. I guess for me, when I was a kid, and even now as an adult, I loved watching classic cartoons. And when Blackface characters appeared, from what I remember, I didn't fully understand racism and Blackface at the time, but there was like something in me as a kid that I always get scared when I saw these Blackface characters, even though I don't think I fully recognize them as them trying to be Black, but I felt like deep down inside it was kind of ingrained in me that they were making fun of me. and it made me feel angry. And I also remember feeling very afraid for some reason. And it wasn't until I got older that I understood what that was. I'm not as scared or angry as it. I just kind of look at it as, I want to know why this was a thing. And I did more research, but I just remember I thought that was an interesting childhood moment of mine.
Yeah, I remember watching that in the Tom and Jerry cartoons. I'd be like, what is that? I didn't really understand it, but I found out about it later, and I got angry. I think
in the chat, people are saying evil is always represented as black and dangerous, and that colorism is one of these impacts as well.
yes, absolutely. Sorry, Lammy's hand is up, or that's Lammy just spoke, right?
I just did, but I also wanted to echo what Ashana just said, because it
Oh, yeah.
reminded me of the classic doll study. I don't know if everyone is familiar with those studies, and
Lammy,
that is the
you read my mind.
perfect answer to this question, right? Because literally these Black kids saw the dolls, but we know that is a representation of themselves, right? So they saw the dolls as the mean one, the unattractive one, and the list goes on like that. So basically this was, self-rejection, isolation, colorism, as mentioned in the chat. Oof, it's deep.
Yeah, you read my mind. I was going to mention the doll test. And I watch it, and it breaks my heart that kids that young have that self-hate in them already due to the media that they've been consuming, right? So it's very important that you take in nutritional things, not just in terms of food, but in terms of content. And if you can't find it, then you need to be really cognizant of what it is that you're looking at or consuming. So the question becomes, what do we do about this, right? Solutions, you have to be aware of your own prejudices and biases, even as a person of African descent, right? When you're in a specific social situation, are you acting the way you are because the person in front of you is Black? Would you be acting any different if the person was non-Black? You need to be cognizant of these things, right? You have to look for material that doesn't propagate these types of stereotypes, and that's difficult. It's very difficult. You'd be hard pressed to find anything in regards to film and media, to be quite honest with you. There's a few outliers, there's exceptions to every rule, but most of the stuff that's on TV is going to harken back to these stereotypes, unfortunately. And you need to have for those of you who have children, who are parents, you need to have honest discussions with your children about the images that they see, and not just leave it up to them to form their own opinions about what it is that they're looking at, right? Why are there no Black characters in this particular cartoon that they're seeing? You need to explain that to them, right? And finally, the main thing is we have to encourage people to tell their own stories. And this is where it comes back to mental health, right? I was seeing all these stereotypes, and it's like weighing down on me, like, why can't I see proper representations, right? Why? And I had taken a break. So I'm a comic book nerd. I read comics up until like the early 90s, and took a break and decided to get back into it again, and realized that nothing had really changed. So that's when I made the decision to do my own thing. Because I don't have the budget to compete with a Disney or whoever, but at least I can provide an alternative so that children and adults, teens, whoever, can see something different, right? So it's about encouraging yourself to tell your own stories, and the process of that, right? The artistic process in and of itself can be mentally healing, right? I said a lot. Any feedback on that? Any questions?
Rajan has had his hand up.
Okay, Rajan, yes.
Yeah, I just have a few comments and a question. So I'm just going to try and integrate everything that we talked about into one question.
Sure.
So a lot of what we talked about was like representation and things like this. But so the question that I have, and without getting too technical, is how can things like AfroFuturism be used as a reclamation for trying to take what we want, but at the same time portray it in like a positive way? Because you talked about like some of the stereotypes, the mammies, the saviors, the this and that and whatever have you. But then we have something like Wakanda, where there's a lot of representation. There's some Afrofuturism in there, but then it also has some of like the trying to break the barriers type of thing. So, I mean, how can we use like the positive aspects of something like Wakanda as a form of reclamation as well, while trying to break these type of stereotypes?
Yeah, great question. So, to be honest, I find the Black Panther movies problematic, but it's not all bad, right? And I'm not hating. My son has Black Panther posters on his wall and all that kind of stuff, and he dresses up as Black Panther for Halloween. So the idea of a Black superhero who is good and powerful is something that's very good for children to see, right? So on a surface level, you can take that and run with it, right? As kids, we tend to imagine ourselves as adults. And I remember just being on the playground myself, trying to play Super Friends and that sort of thing. So the idea of a Wakanda and a Black Panther, what are you doing now to ensure that that exists for your descendants sometime in the future? Right? People often ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? That's cool. You should know about that. But now let's expand that. Where do you see your descendants 7 generations from now? Right? People who you will never meet. 250 years from now, none of us are going to be here. Right? What are you doing today to ensure that your descendants 7 generations from now will be living the kind of life that's idealistic? So it's taking those small aspects from those things and kind of putting it into the real world with who you can affect within your circle. Does that kind of help answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're over time. We're just about over time. So any other questions?
Are you going to be sharing some images of your book with us? Of your many of your publications?
Yes, I can do that. Where am I now? What I wanted to say is I'll kind of end it off with this, and then I'll show some images. So here's a proverb, and for the life of me, I don't know where it's from. Maybe someone in the room knows, but until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero. So that's the main takeaway that I want you to gain from this, right? Be empowered to tell your own stories. And it doesn't even have to be something that you publish and become famous. And it's not even about that. The process of actually creating something is very good for your own mental wellness, right? I use Afrofuturism specifically because that's just what I like. It doesn't have to be Afrofuturism for you, although it could be. So yeah. And with that, let's see. I think I showed some images at the beginning, but I can just go back to those here. Bear with me a quick moment. Where are we? Okay, so here's some pictures from the book. So these are the 5 that are out now. And if you go to blacksuncomics.com, that's blacksuncomics.com. Actually, I could put the link in the chat here. You can kind of check out the website and see the books. Any questions for me, just in general?
So Lemmy has his hand up.
Yes, Lemmy.
Thank you again for this wonderful presentation and for creating all of the discussions that we've had. I was just curious if you have any maybe suggestions, recommendations for some examples of media with Black people that doesn't propagate stereotypes. For some reason, I feel like that's so hard just because of the nature of the industry, but it might exist. And I think you are probably a good, I don't want to say expert, but like you're a good person to probably, because you've done this research, so I'm sure you have some examples.
So I can tell you some examples that I let my children watch. There's not much on Netflix, to be very honest with you. So a lot of times I have to have conversations with them about what it is that they're seeing. There's Bino and Fino. on YouTube. And I'm going to mention stuff for kids because that's just the world that I'm in, right? That's just the world that I'm in. So there's Bino and Fino, there's Jules TV, there's Miss Monica. She does like preschool toddler type stuff. There's, what else is there? My son was watching Camp Cretaceous. There is, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But your question is a good one. I think what I need to do is come up with a list and distribute that of what I think. So maybe I can arrange to do that. And I don't know if there's a way to submit it afterwards. Maybe Deborah and I can speak about that. But I think I really need to sit down and come up with an exhaustive list of what I think is not going to damage minds, young minds at least. So I hope that helps a bit. I think Ashana has her hand up.
I'm sorry, I totally forgot the question I was gonna ask. But I guess I have so I have a bit of a weird question, but is it okay that I contact you later in the near future for an interview for a college paper, if that's okay? I understand. Sure. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That was pretty much it. I did have another question, but I totally forgot. Sorry.
No worries.
Kellen, can I put your email address in the chat, or are you comfortable with me putting that in there?
Not my email address, because
right.
unfortunately I do get a lot of trolls and spam.
Okay.
But if you go to my website, I think the form, there's a contact form that should be
Yes.
working now. So if you use the contact form, I will get that. And that's probably the best way to get in touch with me. Zahaya.
Hi. Yeah, I was wondering if you have other resources of where I could find information about Afrofuturism or events that are going on, or tapping into other communities. Because I definitely identify with that, and so I'd love to connect with more people who are in that world.
So there's, I'm just putting some things in the chat now. There's BSAM Canada, the Black Speculative Arts Movement Canada. If you Google that, it'll come up. And there's also a brother named Quentin Versetti, who founded, I believe it's a nonprofit called Astro Sankofa, and they put on a lot of Afrofuturist events. So that's a good place to start. And if you, whatever social media you're on, if you just look up the hashtag Afrofuturism, you'll get a slew of stuff. Right, you can kind of go through and pick and choose what you like and kind of start there. So hopefully that helps you on your journey. I'm glad that's your deal. We need more Afrofuturists. Okay, so we are officially over time. I want to be respectful.
People are still here. It's fine.
Okay. Any other questions in general? Or did anyone just want to say something?
I did want to share that when it comes to media and Black media in general, although she's mostly known for her feminist work, Bell Hooks wrote a lot of essays and books around media and how we view media and from the lens of Black folks, and also kind of the history of that, which is very interesting if anybody's interested in like intellectual work around that.
And Lammy, you have your hand up. Is that an old hand or is that a new hand?
It's a new hand. I was just curious, Kelvin, if you can maybe speak to your experience in terms of working in the industry, creating these comics. What's been your experience like?
It's been very positive. I had no idea how people would react to it when I did it. I know it was something that I wanted to do, and I wasn't getting any younger, so I said, let me just do this. And the book actually debuted at the Black Speculative Arts Movement, their inaugural conference in 2016. It was at OCAD. And I had set up my booth and I was nervous. I was nervous. I didn't show it, but I was really nervous. And people really took to it. I was very blessed that people liked it as much as they did. So my experience for the most part has been positive. There's also a negative side that comes with it too, in that I get a lot of trolls who I just block. That's the beautiful thing about social media. So there is that negativity, but it just shows me that what I'm doing needs to be done, right? I was at Toronto Comic Con last year, I believe, and a lady came up to the booth who recognized my books and said, "Oh yeah, I have your books, and my daughter has them, and she won't let go of them." Right? She just keeps reading them over and over and over again, and she took them to her school for show and tell. And it's things like that that really make my day, right? To know that the ideas are resonating, and that a child who's reading this can look and see themselves reflected in the characters and images that are positive and empowering, right? That's the whole point. There's nothing wrong with thug movies per se, but we just need to balance it. There needs to be a balance, right? And that's the issue, right? All we get is the thug stuff, and we don't get the other stuff.
There's a comment that you seem to enjoy making Black Sun comics, and the question is, have you found it liberating making an independent comic and not having to go through the traditional gatekeepers like Marvel or DC?
Yes. I love self-publishing, but that was my goal from the beginning. I had no desire to go to ask permission, to ask someone permission if I can publish this.
Right.
I don't like the idea of having to convince someone else that my idea is good. If I have a good idea, I know it's a good idea. So I wanted to go straight to the people and let them decide, right? The people will let me know if what I'm doing is garbage or if it's valuable. So I'm not against, working with a Marvel or a DC or whatever, but only if my story and my ideology is not compromised.
Right.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you if you're going to be, before I take Amanda's hand, her question, are you going to be at Comic-Con this year?
No, because I'm working. I have to finish these books.
Okay.
So I'm not going to be at Comic-Con this year. I will be at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival though.
When is that?
This is in April 29th.
That's fantastic.
April 29th and 30th. It's a 2-day event at the Toronto Reference Library. And this is for like hardcore comic nerds, like even nerdier than the people who go to Comic-Con. Here you will find all sorts of obscure comics from people all over the world. It's
We'll
great.
have to
It's
make
one of my
that one.
favorite events.
So if we have time, can you take Amanda's question?
Yeah, sure. What's Amanda's question?
One, thank you so much. This has been fantastic, and the presentation you did was fantastic and beautiful. I was wondering if this is something that you've ever thought of or that you will be interested in the future, because I could see these conversations continuing for a very long time. But creating either if people are interested in, or if there exists already, probably do, like Afrofuturism reading club or book club rather. And possibly even given that you do this work, if like you do some workshops either with young people or young at heart like me, but those kind of things, if these are things that you're already involved in or that you'll be interested in the future.
Yes, I've worked with Durham Black Educators. I've worked with Eastview Boys and Girls Club and Ontario Trillium Foundation. I teach comic making workshops, right, for students grade 6 to grade 8.
Great.
And I've done stuff with high school students, and I plan to do one with adults as well. And that's actually open to everyone. Anyone can join. If you want to learn how to make comics, I go through the process of, creating characters, determining their strengths and weaknesses, creating your protagonist and your antagonist, really character-driven stuff. And then, the juxtaposing those two against themselves kind of writes the story for itself. So I go through that, and then the process of actually making a comic. So, what a panel is, how to compose your panels, medium shots, wide shots, close-ups, how to use them effectively, and writing your story. So yes, I've done that with students, and I plan to do some more in the future. If you want to find out, if you go to again the website blacksuncomics.com, and there's a mailing list sign up there. If you just enter your email there, I will send out emails for when I'm doing another workshop. So you can decide if you want to come listen to me nerd out about storytelling.
I definitely
and
will.
help
That
you
sounds
along.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. I will. Thank you very much.
And people should follow you on Instagram, Blackstone Comics. And
Yeah, it's I'm
that's
trying to do the TikTok thing, but I'm old and I don't really understand how TikTok works. So
I encourage you to do that because you'll get such great exposure from that.
I will
And
take your advice.
I want to take a couple of minutes to thank you so very much for your time. This has been an amazing interactive experience. I think everyone enjoyed it. Thank you for everyone who joined us. If you're going to be talking about this experience, use hashtag BMHW2023, hashtag Black Mental Health, be well in social media posts. We're going to be cleaning up this recording and putting it on the blackmentalhealth.ca webpage for you to watch it again or to share it with others. Kelvin has told you if you want to connect with him, you can do so by going to his webpage and going to the contact section. And there are some other really great events still happening for Black Mental Health Week until Sunday, when we will have our closing ceremony at the Toronto Archives on Spadina, where it's starting from 11 to 4. It's a family-friendly event. And we wanted to have Kelvin there, but he can't make it. But we will have some other vendors who will be doing everything from face painting to selling products for the culture. We're going to be having spoken word, dance, food, free food, if I may, and music, and some amazing speakers for that afternoon. So don't let the snow keep you away. If we do get that snowfall they're talking about, come and have some warm beverages with us there. My name is Deborah Williams. I'm with Stripes Toronto. I really appreciate your time today, Kelvin. If you have any closing words, please, I'll turn the floor over to you before we close out.
No, I think the session was great. Again, thanks for everyone who participated. I know it can be kind of intimidating to put your hand up and say stuff, but you all did. I hope you gained something valuable from the discussion. I'm appreciative of everyone who organized the event. Thanks again, Deborah, for inviting me. Yeah, just keep in touch, right? And thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your evening. I appreciate you, Kelvin. Take care.
All right.
Thank
See you
you.
later,
Good
folks.
night.
Good night.